Kia ora koto. Welcome in another master class. My name is Jędrzej Białkowski, and I have a pleasure to have the interview with Professor Thorsten Hens. Thorsten is a professor of financial economics at University of Zurich. He also belongs to the Swiss Finance Institute. He has nearly 100 publications, 10 books. His research focuses on behavioral finance, fintech, sustainable finance, and we are very fortunate to have Thorsten as our Ariskin Fellow.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thorsten, take into account that much of your interest and research focus on sustainable investing. Let's start from very beginning. What is ESG and how it is different from other definitions of responsible investing which are around?
Sustainable finance is a new field, and there's still many terms floating around. ESG, SRI, SDG. So ESG means environment, social and governance, which you should respect when you invest. SRI means socially responsible investing, so it has a stronger focus on the social component. And SDG are the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which are 17, many things where you have no influence as an investor.
So why actually it is such a big deal nowadays?
Well, we have a problem. One problem is the global warming, where the average temperature is rising. The average is not that a problem, but the extreme weather conditions which we face. So some people say this might be the end of humankind. I'm a little more optimistic, but we have a real problem on the E component. The social, the governance, these are problems which we have always been facing, and from what I've heard here in New Zealand, you're quite good on those dimensions already.
And from perspective of organization and based on your experience, what is the most effective way of measuring exposure to ESG?
Well, the way it goes is there are rating agencies, and they look at publicly available information. So they look on your reports which you do. The best is if you have a sustainability report, then you will report many things like how many times your employees take a plane back and forth and this type of things. And then they have some ways to do some accounting. So that's how it goes. Now, recently also accounting standards have been introduced. IFRS are international accounting standards. So they tell you how you should report on the ESG dimensions. And New Zealand, from what I've learned by April 1st, has made this mandatory for the big companies and also for the financial institutions.
Mm. Well, you know, as we both know, there is this topic of ESG is quite popular in academic literature. But I would like to discuss with you one particular line of research. Recent studies shows substantial disparity between ESG ratings for the same or similar compounds. Do you worry that it will have a negative impact on transparency of the industry and generally belief in this new movement?
Yes, this was a big shock, I would say, to the industry. But if you see how it works, there haven't been any standards, and every rating agency tried to get data from public information, and then they have different weights. Some rating agency puts more weight on the environment, the other on the social, the next one on the governance. Moreover, we had 150 rating agencies at some time, so everybody tried to make a fortune with offering his ratings, and then we created aggregate confusion. So the investor said, why should I care? It says everything and nothing, so maybe I shouldn't care. But now there was a response, as I said before, the IFRS standards, accounting standards, and also regulators in Europe, the UK, and the US, they said, we need transparency here. We don't want to intervene how you do your weights, but you have to reel this so that the investor knows if I go with this rating, it's more an environmental rating, or with that rating, it's more social rating. So my view is that this was a shocking result, but it's getting better over time. It was like a mistake in an infant industry.
Let's talk about New Zealand. Do you think the small open economy like New Zealand are in better place than the larger economies to become ESG leader? Do you think that it can bring a benefits in the long run to the country?
Well, it depends not so much on the size, but whether you are in some networks. For example, take the European Union. When you have a country like your country, Poland, they cannot do their own thing, right? They're in the European network, there are regulations from Brussels. When you have Switzerland, which is my country, there's a lot of pressure from the Europeans that Switzerland has to do what the Europeans are doing. But from what I understand, New Zealand is more independent. There's not a big brother telling you what you should do. The other aspect, of course, is how costly will this be for you? Before I came here, I have been to Australia. They don't like ESG very much because they have a lot of mining. So that's very costly for them. But from what I've learned here, you have a very great nature. You don't do much mining no longer. You export milk powder, you told me, and a lot of timber. But timber, from what I understand, is a recycling process. So when you cut some trees, some new will be grown. So you're in a good position, being more independent and having no industry which would suffer very much from it.
So in New Zealand, we have relatively new law required large companies, financial institutions which are covered by the FMC Act to start making climate-related disclosures. What is your experience with this type of disclosure in countries like Germany, Switzerland, and Norway? What was their approach? What worked? What didn't?
Well, first of all, it's a pain because you have to collect data. This means you have to hire some people doing it. And at the beginning, it was not clear how to do it, but now there are some standards. So you can hire some trained people, and they know, okay, I have to look at this and that, and then you have this IFRS standards. So I guess there's no way out. You should do it, and it will help over time. You can also then see how you improve over time when you have some data so that the management can take some measures. So I think you have to swallow this pill and do it.
Indeed. So let's talk about the other side of the coin, So in the world, which is very much ESG oriented, and this type of investing become a mainstream, do you think there is a still place for a so-called sin stocks? And what is the cost of running not ESG-friendly business nowadays? And almost like a follow-up question, how those companies can navigate to balance the pros and cons of their activity in this new environment?
So-called sin stocks are shares in companies which provide goods which people consume. You might say this is sinful, but it's alcohol, it's tobacco, it's casino, and other things which I don't mention here. But as long as there is demand for these goods, there will be producers for the goods. The only problem with sustainable investing then is their so-called cost of capital goes down, so it will be goes up. So it will be more difficult for them to finance on the equity market, on the bond market. But since it's a great business, there will still be investors so that the demand will be satisfied.
We observed that some of the oil companies they try to do a good things to potentially offset their main line of business. How successful those operations are? Does it help them? Does it change the perception of
that's,
them?
From my view,
without naming those companies here.
If you're an oil company, you have a problem because CO2 mainly comes from burning fossil fuels. I know you can do some window dressing and make you look nicer with some maybe giving some money to universities or whatever, but I think you have a problem. For those, I would say, you have to redefine what you are.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't say I'm an oil company, but you should say I'm an energy provider. And then it's more open. Then you can also do solar, you could do wind, because you have already a position in the market as energy provider. Then you're not trapped in a place which might be a stranded asset.
Talking about development of the concept and how it is accepted in the industry. From time to time in the financial newspapers you can come across the concept of greenwashing. How serious the problem of greenwashing is? Do you have any recommendation how the problem of greenwashing can be addressed internally and externally to the financial companies and organizations?
Greenwashing is a scandal, and companies don't want to have scandals, but at the beginning it was hard to avoid it. When you had all these different ways of measuring, maybe you did it like A recommended, and then a journalist said you have a scandal because B would do it differently, right? So this was a real problem. But now it converges. We have these IFRS standards and we have regulations how to make it transparent. And a good hint would be find a third party which you can blame. That's always a good idea. So when you when you get a big company, I don't put names here, but there are 3 or 4 major players in the industry. If they say you are green, you are green. So then it's what you can blame somebody else. So as a small company in New Zealand, I wouldn't try to say I'm blue, I'm green, I'm red, whatever. Take a big name. If they say you are green, you're green.
And to what extent the audit of companies' profile is developed? Do companies are externally checked to what extent they are really green or socially conscious or?
Yeah, now the IFRS, the accounting standards, and the auditors, they will have to check it. So that's a huge step forward. But if you compare what IFRS recommends and what New Zealand has adopted, it's only half of that. So there's still some steps to go. But I understand when you start from 0, maybe you don't go to 100, you start with half of that.
Well, so we're definitely living in times when ESG investing become a mainstream. But let's think about the future. What future do you envision for ESG investing? Do you think we have seen peak of the interest of it? Or ESG is here to stay?
So at the beginning it was like Wild West, aggregate confusion and this and that. So very interesting for researchers because it was unclear what are the right concepts and all these things. But now it becomes mainstream. Now we have standards, we have regulations, people do it, and then it also gets boring. So it has reached the peak because now it's boring. Everybody will do it.
But boring is from academic perspective, but from perspective of industry, do you think there is still something to come new or something unexpected? And
No. I think there has been a polishing, a process which clarified many things. Now you should do it, and then there are more interesting things. So now you could more look into innovations again. So what can we do to make the world better instead of regulations and all those things? So this part I hope is more or less settled, but still we haven't solved the problem, right? One thing is to measure, the other thing is tell me how to solve it. So we need more innovations.
Yeah. Do you think that this trend of ESG investing facilitate development of new technologies, and or to what extent it is a driver?
There's a lot of research showing that the so-called market mechanism, like divesting from sin stocks, as I mentioned before, or exclusion rules and this and that, doesn't really bite. What bites more is engagement. So when you own a share in a company, you can go to the General Assembly, you can voice something. So this is the most effective channel. So look, when you are an investor, typically the bank goes for you, right? But I'm not sure on the ESG side that they would do what is in your interest. So maybe you tell the bank that you will go. It's also nice in Switzerland. If you go to a company, you might get chocolates because many produce chocolate. So it's important to engage. That's much more effective than just divesting.
Yeah. Our interview is coming to the end. So I really appreciate that we can have this inspired conversation about this new trend, which become actually a mainstream now. And I would like to thank you for your interview. It was great to have you here.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.